And I just on the outside looking in, it must have been very tough to have that fight looking at what you were up against, but you had it. And that fight has you sitting in that chair right now. That fight has you out there doing all these amazing things that we're going to talk about. And just as I said when you came in, beyond honored to have you here as an individual, just who you are, overcoming these things and making changes in people's lives. You're a fighter. And it just, where do you think that comes from?
She had actually gotten out of her car and kind of done a quick assessment of the scene to see who was injured, how many ambulances did we need, and knowing that I was the most severely injured, she had come back to my car and she had just held my hand and prayed for me while she was waiting for the ambulance to get there. So MADD is a nonprofit organization that was started by a mother who lost their child because of a drunk driver. And the agency serves to empower victims, support families of loved ones who've passed away, to work towards creating new legislation throughout the country to keep our roadways safe. That woman was going to mess up somebody else's life that day, one way or another. And then I started to feel disgust at myself. I too have made the decision to get behind the wheel after drinking, so it could have been me who hit Sarah. Either way, when it starts to sink in, one realizes that stories like Sarah's have less and less to do with fate and more to do with another person's bad choices.
It's powerful.
I almost just started crying reading that one.
That
this is
very
dated
powerful.
2012, so it's been a while since I've read that. Wow.
And welcome to the Apex Lifestyles Podcast. I'm your host, Bob G. DMD, and I'm here as always with my co-host,
Dennis V. How you doing today, Bob?
I'm doing great, man. We just got out of our vacations. We just had an amazing guest in, Capadonna from Wu-Tang.
Wu-Tang was in the house.
And, we're broadening the horizons a little bit. We got a very incredible story to share with you guys today. Incredible guest.
Very special guest.
And Dennis, you've known her for a long time.
Yeah, I'd like this. We met a little over 20 years ago. You were one of my students in college. You're one of the first people that actually babysat my children. I've watched you grow. I've known you personally. I've watched you grow professionally. DYS, DCF. You had a tragedy that you dealt with that you've really overcome, and you've brought a lot of awareness to a very special topic. Sarah Carmichael, welcome to Apex Lifestyles.
Welcome,
Thanks,
Sarah.
Dennis. Thanks, Bob. Good to be here.
Yeah, so let me ask you, Dennis brought your story to me and I was just awe-inspired, right? So in 2008, you had something, you were in finishing up school and you had finishing, your career, starting your career and all this.
Yep.
And then we hit a sidebar.
Yep.
Why don't you take it from there?
Sure. So I was 26. It was February 2008. I was working for DYS, as Dennis said. Doing things a 26-year-old does, hanging out with my friends. I was dating my high school crush. We had just recently started dating a few months before. I was at the top of the world as a 26-year-old. And on February 8th, I was heading to Worcester to meet up with my friends, actually. Some girls Kate, Jacqueline from college. We were planning to head out to a going-away party for one of our friends. He was moving to Arizona, and I never made it. And so I was driving my car. I was in the car by myself. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. I was in Framingham, where Speen Street and Route 30 meet each other, if you can picture that.
Yep. I know exactly where it is.
Yep. So I was on Speen Street, and I was stopped at the red light, and I was going to be taking a left and getting onto the Mass Pike to head towards Worcester. When my light turned green, I started driving, and that intersection has two lanes that turn left, and I was in the right-hand lane of those. So when the light turned green, I started driving, and a car came from the left side, ran the red light. The car that was in the left-hand lane turning left saw them running the red light, so they kind of slammed on their brakes, which completely exposed my driver's side door, and the car slammed right into me. Pushed my car out into oncoming traffic that was coming through the intersection, and 5 cars total were involved in the crash. I had the most significant injuries out of everybody. So the car that was in the left lane, the one that stopped, exposing my vehicle, that was like a livery service car. And this woman, her name is Kelly Short, she was being driven home after a day of work, or maybe even out to dinner to meet her husband. And when this car slammed on its brakes, because it was a livery service, the car was equipped with a camera system that came on when the brakes got hit. And the offender actually, did I even say that she was a drunk driver?
No, but
Oh my
I think
God.
that's very germane to the
Beep,
to
like,
the
back
subject.
up.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
what's going on here? So yeah, the lady that ran the red light at 4:30 in the afternoon was drunk. She had a BAC of 0.26.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, which is over 3 times the legal limit. The legal limit in Massachusetts is 0.08.
Do you know what the equivalent? How many ounces of liquor would that be for a normal? Let's say the average, 150-pound adult.
Sure.
Right.
So I can't break it down into like how many drinks it could have been, because it depended on what type of liquor she was drinking. Was she drinking hard liquor? Was she drinking beer? Was it wine? But what I can say is, and I think I learned this probably in one of my classes at Anna Maria back in the day, in terms of a BAC, 0.08 is the legal limit because you can still function at 0.08 and you still have most of your faculties and are able to operate a car. Now, as a side note, Mothers Against Drunk Driving does not support any drinking and driving. If you are under the influence of alcohol, you are impaired, whether it's a legal limit or not, and we do not support anyone drinking any amount and driving. But at 0.08, presumably, you still have your faculties. You're still aware of what's going on. You can still hit the brake. You can still turn the wheels. Your eyes are still open. As you consume more alcohol, you start losing function of certain parts of your body. At 0.26, you should be blacked out.
Wow.
0.3 is comatose.
Wow.
So if that says anything about tolerance and
no
this
kidding.
woman's ability to consume the alcohol and still be functioning, like she was someone who was probably struggling with alcohol addiction. So she was also known to the local police officers as someone that they pulled over before on
Yep.
suspicion of drunk driving. So what's really amazing about this story is the diligence in the response efforts from the Framingham Police Department and the first responders out there. Blaze Tersoni, who is a lieutenant now at Framingham PD, was an officer on duty that day. He was the first one on the scene, along with Tim Campion, who was a paramedic for Framingham. Officer Tersoni knew from the moment he saw the offender that he needed to do everything by the book. He needed to make sure he got a warrant to get her BAC from the hospital once she went there. And he did just that. It was after hours on a Friday by the time EMTs had taken me to the hospital and they had cleared the scene, and he immediately got a judge on the phone, got the subpoena to get that blood alcohol, and they were able to arraign her on a felony OUI charge because of the extent of my injuries is why it rose up to a felony.
Well, I have so many questions now, and I'm
Yes.
sure the listeners do too.
Yes.
And I'm going to do my best, and I'm sure Dennis can put some color in and add to that. But did she sustain any injuries that you know of?
She sustained 0 injuries.
Isn't that just unbelievable, right?
Yep.
That's karma.
Yes.
So you went to go and you're going to have a night out with friends, and you never got there, and you probably don't have a recollection. Can you kind of speak to some of that? Like, when did you find out that you were in this accident?
Yep. So I don't have any memory of that entire day beyond waking up and what I had for breakfast that day. And the accident didn't happen, or the crash, I should say, didn't happen until 4:30 in the afternoon. So that's a lot of time that I lost. And from talking with friends, from talking with family, and I eventually got to meet the woman, Kelly Short, who was in the vehicle next to me. She had actually gotten out of her car and kind of done a quick assessment of the scene to see who was injured, how many ambulances did we need. And knowing that I was the most severely injured, she had come back to my car and she had just held my hand and prayed for me while she was waiting for the ambulance to get there. When I met her, she had told me she had no clue if I was going to live or die after that day, and that she, in that moment, just felt like I was somebody's daughter and she didn't want me to be alone if I was going to die. So I was instantly unconscious, and don't remember anything about the crash. I was in a medically induced coma for about a week and a half. And when I started coming out of that was when I kind of started piecing together where I was, what had happened to me. And I remember my first thought was, did I do this to myself? Because I was going to be devastated if I had been the one that caused this to myself. And my parents were there and they said, no, this was not your fault. I think they were afraid at first to tell me that it was a drunk driver. I think they weren't sure how I was going to react. But I remember kind of just saying okay, well, that happened. And looking at myself in the hospital bed, I was laying in this hospital bed. I could not move. My neck was in a neck brace. I had metal bars coming out of my hips to stabilize my pelvis. I couldn't stand up. A million other things going on. And I was like, all right, well, what do we need to do here? Because this is cramping my style. I need to be able to get up. I need to be able to move around. All right, this was a bad thing that happened to me. It wasn't my fault. Let's move beyond that and let's figure out how we get back to being me. And so as I was kind of talking to my friends, once I was awake and aware of what was going on, they were like, we were so mad at you. We thought you blew us off. We thought you were out with your new boyfriend. We were so mad. And then their anger slowly started turning into fear when they couldn't get a hold of me and they couldn't get a hold of anybody in my family. And it was Kate, actually, who ended up getting a hold of one of my sisters through MySpace or something super ancient like that.
I was just going to say, that dated it.
That's a long time ago.
Super ancient. And my sister told her, no, she was in a car crash last night and she might die. You probably need to come to the hospital now. So then it was all hands on deck. The whole troops rolled up to the hospital, and I was in the ICU, so no, they wouldn't let anybody see me. And I can only imagine what that was like for my family and my friends, getting that phone call from the police. My mother getting that phone call from the police saying, you got to get to the hospital right now. Your kid might die. And
I can't even imagine getting that. That's every parent's worst nightmare.
The worst nightmare. I can only assume, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg of how much this crash has impacted my entire family. Everybody I know has been impacted by this crash. Help me out with your question again so I can kind of remind myself about what I want to talk about here.
So the question was when you first realized, what did you sustained the accident, and then you wake up after a medically induced coma, and I can't imagine the confusion that must have went through your head at that moment,
Yep. So when I actually have really funny memories, I guess, of when I was in the medically induced coma. I kind of felt like I was awake and a little bit knew what was happening. But I really honestly thought that I was laying in a field of flowers, and that I was being like pampered by everybody, and I didn't know why I was laying in the field of flowers, but I remember just feeling really peaceful laying in this field of flowers. Now, when I woke up and realized kind of what was happening, I could tell. I was in Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, and my brother, I have 3 siblings. My brother's the only older one than me. I have 2 younger sisters. And my brother, he was 27, probably not really that good at identifying his feelings and expressing them. And the only thing he knew, he was like, I just felt compelled. I had to start painting. And they probably like the size of this, thing you have hanging on the wall here. He had a piece of paper that big, and he had painted this, picture of like a field and blue sky and sun and trees and flowers, and they put it on the window of my hospital room, so the sun was coming through and filling the room with all this color and light, like from this painting. And it's just so curious, because like the whole time I was in that medically induced coma, I thought I was like just laying, sleeping in a field of flowers. So it's like I kind of was there but wasn't really there.
That's so amazing that you're, whatever you got from, being there, whatever got through, imprinted in that way. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It was part of it. Do you feel like you felt the energy of the people around you?
I think that must have been what it was, because I think also too, beyond the initial, like, did I do this to myself? I kind of had a sense of like what had happened to me. And I mean, I was still on a ton of medication when I came out of the medically induced coma. So I was trying to understand everything the doctors were saying to me as best I could. And I remember just kind of saying to them, hey, what do you have me on for medications here? Because this is feeling a little loopy. Like, if this is my new normal, I want to be able to feel it. I want to be able to know what's going on, because I want to be able to tell you guys when something's wrong. And, they were kind of like, I don't think we should take you off all these medications. They had me, Dennis, you're going to die. They had me on Seroquel because my mother told them that I just as a side note, just started taking a anxiety prescription because I was having anxiety. And so my mother knew that, but didn't quite know what she was talking about. And she had said something about, she just started this medication, blah, blah, blah. So they had me on Seroquel. Dennis, that's an antipsychotic medication.
Heavy duty.
I'm like, this has got to go. And then they had me on all types of other, like, opiate painkillers and stuff. And I was like, no, can I have some Tylenol or some ibuprofen? Because I need to be able to feel what's going on here. So in addition, I mentioned I was in a neck brace. The C1 and C2 vertebrae in my neck were fractured.
Oh my. And
the base of my skull was also fractured. By the grace of God, I did not require a surgery to fuse those fractures. I stayed in that god-awful neck brace for so long, it felt like. But I stuck it out, and the vertebrae and my skull fracture healed on its own well enough that I didn't need to have surgery to have it fused. Both sides of my collarbone were broken. 11 of my ribs were broken. Those broken ribs collapsed both of my lungs.
I was just going to ask. Yeah.
Yep. One collapsed on scene, and the other one collapsed during the emergency surgery that I was in when I first got taken into the ER. My blood pressure dropped so low that my lung collapsed while I was in the surgery. And I didn't really understand this, I think, when I was in the hospital, but months later I had access to all my medical records for like the court case and stuff, and so I was just reading through them, and I was like, resuscitated, that's an interesting word. I'm like, what does that mean? And I look it up and I'm like, oh, that's curious. So I actually stopped breathing twice, and had to be resuscitated twice in the emergency room during that surgery. And I was like, I think that means I died. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that means I died.
It did. Yeah.
Twice, actually.
Yeah.
So here I am, which is awesome. The doctors at Brigham and Women's Hospital were amazing. So the lungs collapsed. I had brain injury. I had bleeding and swelling in my brain, and I had a grade 3 concussion, which is the most severe kind of concussion you can get. My heart was bruised, which I think is like the saddest injury of all. Like, you just did a big puppy dog lip, and that's what I feel every time I have to say it. I'm like, oh, my heart was bruised. But yep, my heart was bruised. I also had, so I was wearing my seatbelt, which saved my life, but also shredded my insides. The way the offender had hit my driver's side door, the whole door got smashed in. The seat I was sitting in got lifted up and over, and I was like pinned between her car and the mangled middle console of the vehicle. They had to use the jaws of life to get me out. And because I was wearing my seatbelt, my insides got pretty messed up. So one of my kidneys was lacerated and had to be sewn back together. My liver was lacerated. My pancreas was lacerated. Portion of my small intestine had to be removed because it was so mangled. My tailbone was broken. My pelvis was shattered. So I have 6 metal plates and 2 screws about that long in my pelvis that won't ever come out. Those are going to be there forever. And I think that's probably all of the injuries.
I thought you were going to say that's it. I mean, I just say, Sarah, first of all, so sorry you went through this. I mean, I just honestly want to start there. But I'm going to go to something that I heard from you. That just, your personality, knowing you came out, you're like, wait a second, this isn't happening. This isn't happening. And you started to control the narrative right away. And you showed the fight and who you are as an individual. And I just on the outside looking in, it must have been very tough to have that fight looking at what you were up against, but you had it. And that fight has you sitting in that chair right now. That fight has you out there doing all these amazing things that we're going to talk about. And just, as I said when you came in, beyond honored to have you here as an individual, just who you are, overcoming these things and making changes in people's lives. You're a fighter, and it just, where do you think that comes from? Is that inherited? Is it you? Like, talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because if you would have asked me on February 7th, 2008, hey, this is going to happen to you tomorrow. What do you think you're going to do? Are you going to be able to survive? Blah, blah, blah. I would have been like, yeah, okay. On February 7th, if I had a paper cut, I would have been crying, okay? On February 8th, it completely changed. And, as I was kind of reflecting on some stuff ahead of coming here today to talk with you guys, I was thinking about how have I been able to be so successful? How was it that I was able to, right from the start, have this positive mindset? And it really wasn't me. It was everybody around me. And it was my family and my friends and even the doctors in the hospital who were just so uplifting because they were so surprised I was alive, first of all. And then that I was like awake and talking and, had a funny personality and was like in a good mood. And I mean, my community gives me strength because I wouldn't be able to do it without them. And I think that was something that I was kind of reflecting on that was really powerful for me. It's like, I have this courage, I have this strength, I am resilient, but not without my community. And
So the support of others is volumes when somebody's going through something.
absolutely. And I mean, my entire family, like immediately from the moment they all found out, they were in that ER waiting room waiting to find out what happened. They in their own grief were looking for ways to get their feelings out, and they all started journaling, and they kept this journal. Whenever anybody came up to the hospital to see me, whether they could actually come in to see me or whether they were just in the emergency room, waiting room, my parents had them write something in the journal.
What foresight on their part for that.
Yeah.
That's really pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that I would be able to, in that moment, if my kid was in there, have the foresight to say, hey, you know what? Like, and think about it. Let's say the worst had happened. Now they have a memory of everybody that gathered around them during that time, and God forbid had to use it as a eulogy kind of a situation to eulogize you. But in the end, it also probably, I'm assuming you've read it.
Yep.
Right? And that must have, and we haven't even talked about the rehab part yet, right? That
Yeah.
must have helped you immensely with mindset during that whole time.
So immensely. And I still have the notebook today. I brought it with me. If you guys want to check it out, or we want to like get some quotes out of it. But yeah, I mean, it's so uplifting and so powerful to look through that notebook and read what everybody was thinking, and the thoughts that they had for me and what their worries were.
Was that your mom's idea or your dad's idea? I mean, I'm just blown away by that, because I don't know that I would have that foresight to do that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm going to plead the fifth on that one, because
Yeah, you don't wanna
if
make anyone-
I
yeah,
say
yeah.
the wrong
Gotcha.
one, the other one's going to be like, oh my God. So yeah, I don't know whose idea it was, but they came up with it. As a family, they thought it would be a great idea. And then what was really even more, overwhelmingly supportive. So as people were coming and signing into this book, they also started bringing like pictures and like memories of like good times with me, and they put together like a photo album. So I had this photo album to look at in addition to having the notebook to read. People were sending me cards like daily. The little chest that I brought with me today is literally filled with hundreds of cards and this notebook and this photo album and just all these inspiring messages of hope that my family and my friends and even people that I didn't know, like my parents' coworkers and just people in their communities that were supporting them, sending me these well wishes. And still sometimes to this day, I take out the box and I go through it and I read some of the stuff if I'm kind of feeling bummed out or, having a bad day or something. It's awesome.
It is awesome. And I can't wait for you to dig some of that out at some point during today. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, how long did you stay at Brigham before they released you and started the rehab process?
I was in the hospital. I was at Brigham for probably 3.5 weeks, and then I transitioned to a physical rehab. The physical rehab experience was...
That's where the work began.
Yeah, that's where the tough stuff began. And I think now, I was 26 years old when this happened. And, you think physical rehab and you're like, oh, who's there? Well, I was the only 26-year-old there.
Yep.
That's for sure. The closest person in age to me was 50 years older than I was. And at the same time, all of the people that were there, I, got to know. I was there for, I think, probably 2-3 weeks before I was able to transition home. And even still then, like I had, in-home stuff all the time when I first went home. But it was how hard I was working at the rehab that got me to be able to go home so quickly. Like the hospital, when I was still in the hospital, they were like, well, we can't send you to rehab until we know you can sit up in your bed. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, okay, well, we better start practicing sitting up in the bed then, like, let's start doing it. And then when I was at the rehab place, they were like, well, if you can't get up and then roll out of the bed to a standing position with your walker, then you're going to have to take a hospital bed home with you when you go home. And I was like, hell no, we're not putting a hospital bed up in my peace and serenity at home. Like, we're leaving this stuff here in the hospital. So I think one of the most powerful memories I have being in rehab was during like one of our group classes one day. They have these like big kind of like elevated mats almost that you lay on and do these exercises, and everybody's spaced out so you're not like on top of each other. But to the same degree, I was laying there helpless essentially because I couldn't get up and just walk away. And one of the other patients in the rehab had a bathroom accident while we were all in the group class. And everybody else was able to, get in their wheelchair or use their walker and leave the room while he was getting cleaned up. And I was just kind of laying there. And, the smell was awful. It had to be so embarrassing for him, and it was like, oh, well, we only have so many people. We have to help him. We can't get you up too. So I literally just laid there while that was all happening around me.
Yeah, humility must have set in pretty quick.
Yep.
For a 26-year-old,
Yep.
The ability to be humble in that situation is not probably close for most 26-year-olds, I would assume.
Correct.
Sarah, a lot of times we talk, first of all, when we talk about this show is about people reaching their apex. And a lot of times when people reach their apex, they have an obstacle. And Bob so eloquently went and talked about the obstacle immediately, because that just really kind of gets the heart of things. You really overcame your obstacle, and I'm sure still to this day there's challenges associated with that. The power of people, the power of positive vibes, your will, your resilience. What else?
So I think also too, like faith. And, whether your faith is connected to a certain religion or it's just faith in yourself or, your family maybe, I think you have to have faith that it's going to get better. And I think that's where I just kind of had that on the horizon and just didn't focus so much on this is where I'm stuck right now. And it was just always kind of looking ahead and looking at what I wanted to get back to doing. And like you said, there are still things that I deal with today as a result of my injuries. One of the most painful kind of complications that I've had to my injuries is, so I told you that I had to have part of my small intestine removed. And so they cut a section out and then they stapled it back together. And you can imagine that creates a lot of scar tissue in your abdomen. And funny thing about scar tissue is,
I think I know where you're going with
this. It doesn't really like to budge. It likes to stick to itself, and causes a lot of pain and inflammation. I have 5 separate times had a bowel obstruction, which was caused by the scar tissue in my intestines sticking together. And if anybody listening doesn't know what a bowel obstruction is, if you picture a garden hose and you kinked it to stop the water from coming out while it's still running, that's what happened to my intestines. So they basically got kinked and everything was kind of backing up. Nothing could come
and
out.
the way you fix that is with surgery.
Well,
right?
That's one of the ways you can fix it. Yep. And so since the first time it happened was not even a month after I was home from the hospital, and I remember being at my mother's home, and I was like, something is not right. Like, this pain does not feel like the rest of the pain. And I just was kind of monitoring it and told my mom about it. And then the day went on, and it was getting worse. And I was like, I think we need to go to the hospital. By the time we got to the hospital, I couldn't even like stand up straight. I was keeled over in pain. And we went right back up to Brigham and Women's, because I was like, that's who knows me now. Like, that's where we gotta go. So the doctors there did not want to immediately open me back up, because they were like, all we're going to do is cause more scar tissue. So they went with this route it's called a NG tube. So they shoved this tube up my nose and down into my stomach, and they sucked everything in my intestines out of my nose.
Just put you at rest.
Yep.
See, I have Crohn's, and that's happened to me multiple times as well. And it is like I've never been stabbed with a knife, but I would have to imagine that's what
You have to imagine.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
It's the worst pain in the world. The worst pain in the world, I think.
So you just continue to have some of these lingering issues. And here's the question I was going to ask before, and it's okay if you have. Have you ever had those times where you're like, why me?
Oh my gosh.
You start feeling sorry for yourself, and
I wouldn't be human if I didn't have those times. I would not be human if I didn't have those times.
And how do you get through those times? Because you have to think that way. You're 26 years old. You just finished. You're working. You're doing your life. You're getting ready to see your friends, and then you have an obstacle that's unimaginable. Explain it. How do you get through it?
I mean, it definitely is not easy still, right? Some days still it's not easy. The most profound complication that I live with is knowing that from the age of 26, knowing that I would never be able to give birth to a child because of the complications to my injuries. I was someone who, I grew up in a big family. I have 27 first cousins. My dad is one of 10 kids. My mom is one of 6. I have a huge village, and as a kid growing up, I wanted nothing more than to get married and start a family of my own. I wanted to be a mother. That was what I was growing up to be. And it was taken away from me in like the blink of an eye because of someone else's bad decision. It's not fair. It's absolutely not fair. Not fair to me, not fair to my parents, who will never get to have a grandchild that I birthed. Not fair to my nieces and nephews, who will never have a cousin. Not fair to the little kids that I probably was going to be their mom to, you know. I think it's going to sound a little bit cliche, but it really goes back to the community and having the support behind you. On a bad day when I wake up and I'm instantly in pain from the moment I open my eyes, and I'm like, oh, do I even want to get out of bed today? The answer is yes. I do want to get out of bed today. At the end of the day, I'm alive. And any complications that I have to live with is better than being dead.
Yeah.
So, I guess it's even a little bit tricky to even talk about still today in terms of like, how do I keep going? Because I think another part of like, how do I keep going is this volunteer work that I do with Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And
this is such a beautiful transition and segue, right? I was actually just feeling
we were ready.
You were seeing me
doing
the thing, right? And the thing is, one of the things I was going to comment on that, and we can definitely get in. The meat and potatoes of what we got here, right? How do you get past? And I guess doing the work with MADD is how you help deal with the justice issue of that inside yourself.
Yep.
Because we touched upon it a little bit, but we didn't really call it what it was, right? Because you're saying it's not fair, right?
Right.
And that idea of fairness, comes up with justice, right?
Yep.
And I know that person probably faced the justice system, but it doesn't actually bring back any of those things that you experienced, right? And I guess that's a beautiful segue into how did you get involved? So now let's move forward. You've gotten through the vast majority of your recovery from these injuries, right?
Yep.
And then how did you get involved, and what compelled you to get involved with MADD?
Yep.
And I guess explain for the listeners, because we have listeners all over the world.
Awesome.
What is MADD? I know lots of people in the United States will know what that is.
Yep.
But we have people from all over the world that watch. So
absolutely. So Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a nonprofit organization. They're actually, I don't want to say they're worldwide, but I know they are in, there's a MADD Canada, I know. I have to guess to look into if there's other ones. So MADD is a nonprofit organization that was started by a mother who lost their child because of a drunk driver. And the agency serves to empower victims, support families of loved ones who've passed away, to work towards creating new legislation throughout the country to keep our roadways safe. There is a national office that's in Texas, and then each state has a state office as well. So naturally, I am connected with the Massachusetts office, although I have done work on the national level as well. So when I was back at home and recovering, I was obviously in a lot of outpatient physical therapy for a while. I was out of work for 3 years following the crash. And it kind of goes along with the vibe we've been talking about. I wasn't really somebody who wanted to be sitting around doing nothing. I was used to working. I was used to having a regular routine. So once I was able to, I had to learn how to walk again. So once I was walking and then eventually got back to being able to drive, I kind of fell back on my Anna Maria days, and I got myself enrolled in a graduate program up at Anna Maria. So I was enrolled in the program. I master's in counseling psychology, and I was taking courses for a certificate in victim studies. And one of the classes, so curious, right? I'm taking all these classes, and I'm like, this is going to be like healing and getting an education. So one of the classes that I was taking that was for the victim studies certificate was, we had a project. We had to research a community agency that supports victims of crime and be able to do a presentation and talk about what the program is and how they service victims of crime. So I was like, oh, maybe this would be a nice chance to reach out to the mothers, So I reached out. I got an interview with one of the victim advocates, Bobby Demnarski. She was the first person that I met. We do a lot of work together still. And going into it, all she knew was I was a student in a graduate degree program working on this project, and I wanted to interview her about her program and what sort of services they offer the community. And so I met her at a Friendly's in Sturbridge, and we were, chatting over coffee, and I'm asking her questions, I'm taking my notes, and she's telling me all these things, and I just felt so compelled. I was like, Bobby, I need to tell you something about me. I'm also a survivor of a drunk driving crash. And I think that you and I could have a good thing together here. So she was completely blown away, and from there, I haven't looked back. I started off being the victim empathy speaker during driver alcohol education classes, which are court mandated after you've been arrested for an OUI. So like sitting in a setting like this, talking with a group of people who could have been the offender that killed me, and telling them my story. Something else I have in the box I brought is so after the victim empathy week in the DAE program is 17 weeks long altogether, and they usually have the victim empathy speaker come in around the 16th week. So then they have like a wrap up week after that, and everybody that's in the class has to fill out these evaluation sheets, and they have to list three ways they've been impacted by, me essentially being there. And the agency that was running this program, the woman there had always sent me the feedback forms afterwards. So I, was able to kind of read and see just exactly how I was impacting people who were actively either, battling with an addiction or maybe just a one-time mistake. I say, or maybe just a one-time mistake, because it's a proven statistic that if you've been arrested for an OUI, it's likely not the first time that you've driven drunk. And on average, people drive drunk up to 80 to 200 times before they're caught.
Wow. Say that again, because I think that's important.
Yep. It's a national average that offenders of driving drunk are driving drunk 80 to 200 times before they are caught.
Wow.
I was going to ask you this question earlier, and it could not come at a better time. What is that message, not only to those in that group, but a message that you give to somebody about thinking to have a drink before they get behind a wheel? Because I 100% agree with what MADD says. No consumption of alcohol or any illegal substance or anything that impairs your judgment should be consumed, because a car is your most dangerous weapon.
Yep.
What's that message?
So I guess, like, for me, it really is talking about what I've been through and talking about how my life has been impacted. And I think when I tell my story, especially early on, I was like 2 years out from this crash and telling my story in a room full of people that could have been the offender that caused the crash I was in.
How is that? Right, I can imagine. I can't imagine, but I can imagine you would have a lot of emotion around that.
Yep.
What does that feel like the first time you're doing it?
I'll tell you this story about the actual justice process, and then I'll answer that question because I think it fits in nicely. So, I had told you guys at the crash, the police officer knew that he was going to need to get the subpoena to get the warrant for her blood alcohol. And so because she wasn't arrested there at the scene, she was, arraigned in court later on the charge of the felony OUI. And promptly after being arraigned, she fled the state of Massachusetts and took off. So, I had an attorney representing me, and, I was going with him to all these court hearings that she was supposed to be appearing at. And, it was like, what the heck's going on here? Her attorney's making up a bunch of excuses. And then after about a year of this, it finally comes out that her attorney has no idea where she is and hasn't had contact with her in a really long time. So the Framingham police, upon learning that, were like so distraught, because I think, for the officers and the paramedics there, just like Kelly, they didn't know if I was going to live or if I was going to die. And I think they were looking at me as a 26-year-old kid in that car like I could have been their kid. And, making that phone call to my mom and hearing how, my mom's reaction to it. Officer Tersoni they all became invested in my recovery and my well-being. So they developed a task force to find her, and they found her down in Florida. She was in a treatment facility down there. I assume getting treatment for alcohol abuse. And so she was extradited back up to Massachusetts to face the music. And the first time I saw her in court, I remember thinking, wow, she looks so normal. She looks like you or me. She could have been any one of us. And at some point throughout the court process, I became aware that I was going to be allowed to make a victim impact statement during her sentencing. And because I had no other outlet, I started writing. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And then it was time to go to the sentencing. And I was like, damn, this is 26 pages long.
That's a State of the Union address.
I might need to trim this baby down.
You used to complain having to do a 3-page paper.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, 26 pages. And that wasn't even like double spaced or anything. So, I gave it to my attorney to take a peek at before we went to court. And he was like, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose them if you say all this. Like, they're not going to be able to keep their focus. You got to try to trim it down. I gave it my best college try. I trimmed it from 26 to 20, and I added a few sentences in the beginning to say that, my attorney told me that you all are going to lose focus on what I'm saying and that I needed to trim this down to just the important stuff. And I was like, so I've trimmed it from 26 to 20 because all of this is important. And all of it needs to be heard. I think I was expecting a different reaction from the offender. She never once looked at me in court. Never once looked up and made eye contact with me. Never once looked up and made eye contact with anyone in my family. Her sister was in the courtroom the day of the sentencing. And as I was reading my impact statement, I heard someone sobbing in the courtroom. And honestly, I thought it was my uncle who was with me because it was kind of coming from where they were all sitting. And so my uncle was with me, my dad, and one of my aunts was with me. And I remember, at first I was trying to, they teach you in college, you make eye contact when you're reading. So at first I was doing that, and then I kind of saw my dad, and I was like, oh, I'm going to cry if I see my dad again. So I stopped looking up, and I was just kind of really reading the paper. And then I could hear this crying, and I was like, oh my God, my uncle is being the biggest baby over there. I need him to stop. Well, we were out having lunch afterwards, and I was like, hey, what was you with the tears in the courtroom? And he was like, that was not me. That was the lady behind me. And it ended up being the offender's sister. She was overcome with emotion listening to me talk. The judge, when I finished speaking, the judge had said to me, he was like, I had a knee surgery last summer, and I feel small for complaining about what I complained about, hearing what you've been through, and seeing you standing here today telling us all this. There were police officers in the courtroom who were wiping tears from their eyes. But I really was hoping she was going to look up and say something to me. I don't really know what I was expecting her to say. I probably would have been pissed if she did talk to me, I don't know how I would have reacted, but I think I was expecting something more than what I got. And so she ended up being sentenced to a 2-year split sentence, which she was to serve 1 year, and then she was to be on probation for a few years. And if she completed her probation successfully, she wasn't going to have to go back and do the extra year in prison. But if she messed up her probation at all, she was going to have to go back and do the extra year of prison. So she was released after 7 months on good time. And, there was no justice in that.
I was going to ask you that.
That was at the time, and I think it probably still is today, that was the maximum extent that she could have been punished by the law.
So I know you've been in the State House, and I know that you're looking to make changes and you've worked towards changes. Is that part of the reason that got you moving to the direction of the State House?
Absolutely, because I was like, I kind of walked away from that, and then with meeting Bobby with MADD and interviewing her, I was like, yeah, this is where I'm going to get some satisfaction. This is where it's going to start, doing some meaning making, and like making this worth something. So I just have always felt, ever since I started doing the volunteer work, whether it's talking at schools, whether it's meeting with victims one-on-one, whether it's up at the State House, if I can save one person from experiencing what I have experienced and experiencing what my family has experienced, then I think it was all worth it.
It would have been very easy for you to, actually, I'm going to take the word easy out because I don't think anything's been easy, but to focus on your rehab, to focus on what you're doing. But giving back, it appears that it's been therapeutic for you as well. And while you're taking care of your body, mind, soul, everything, you're looking out for others. That is just an amazing way to give back. You have an amazing event coming up.
Yes.
With MADD. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah,
because I'm telling you, we're pretty hyped about that.
I'm really excited about this event. So,
and again, I just want to say, every time you talk about this, it's the biggest smile you have. And you have a big smile, but it just shows how passionate you are about what you do.
Thank you, Dennis. I really appreciate you saying that. So, as we've been talking about, I've kind of, come up in my volunteer career with MADD, and they kind of have been giving me some bigger assignments lately. And something that I got connected to a couple years ago is the annual fundraiser that they do, and it's the Walk Like MADD event. So this is a national event that each state has one of these events, and for a long time, the event has been held out near the Boston area. And the first year that I got connected to it, they had asked me to be the master of ceremonies. Can you come out to the walk? Can you do a little ditty on the microphone? Make us laugh, call the raffle tickets, yada, yada. I was like, I can definitely do that. And I had a really great time at the event, and I said, you know what? I'm going to be back next year, and I'm bringing my family with me next year, and we're going to make a thing. So the second year I had done it, which was 2023, I was like, all right, family, we have to come up with a team name, and then we have to, get out there, pound the pavement. We're doing this fundraising. It's going to be a great time. So we came up with the team name. We call it the Carmichael Dojo. Very interesting name, and I'll tell you where it came from. When I was in the hospital, and my family was, trying to process all of this, somebody, or maybe even a group of them, had gone to the Build-A-Bear store and made this teddy bear in a little karate suit with a black belt. And they gave him to me, and they told me, when I was awake from the coma, they had said to me, like, this is you, like, you're kicking ass, like, you got a black belt, like, you've got this little bear is gonna, like, keep you motivated. And it's funny, I was gonna bring the bear today, but I actually don't have the bear in my possession right now. In March, I gave him to my brother because my brother had a very unexpected medical thing come up, and he had to have a tumor removed from his spine. And I was like, I think you need the bear right now. Yeah. So he has the bear right now, and he's doing great.
Your family's got some of the coolest ideas for supporting each other. Really, truly, like, it's
unbelievable.
And we're gonna have to go through this chest in a minute too. I don't want to forget about that.
Yeah. So we call it the Carmichael Dojo, not because we are really big into karate or we're actually black belts, but because, like, what do you practice at a dojo? You go to a dojo and you practice learning about courage. You practice learning about strength. You practice learning about all these values that it takes to be a survivor. And so the Carmichael Dojo is more about, like, courage, strength, resiliency, and faith. So that's where we got the name of it from. So this year, let me back up a little bit. So last year, the location that the MADD has been having the walk at was in Wakefield, Lake Quannapowitt, a beautiful place, absolutely beautiful. And just from my kind of impressions being involved for the last 2 years, and I got on last year. I was on the planning committee as well, so I had kind of given some feedback after the event last year that like this was a great event, but I think we've outgrown this space. And I also really kind of, I'm from Worcester, not Worcester, Mass, but Worcester County, and I used to live in Worcester. And something that's always been kind of noticeable for me is like the lack of visibility that MADD has in this central part of the state. Out near the Boston area, yes, very visible. Even like Western Mass, it's visible out there. But in Central Mass, I kind of feel like maybe the visibility of MADD is lacking a little bit. So I had posed this idea that why don't we bring the walk to Worcester? And in doing that, I knew I would have connections like yourself, like the other agencies I've worked at, things like that. Also, I am partnering with another person. His name's Josh Alexander. He is a local Worcester resident. He's the captain of Team Lexi's Riders, who is a longtime family and team that's been participating in this walk with MADD after they lost their loved one, Alexis Correa, to a drunk driver. And I had said, hey, Josh, you live in Worcester. What do you think about kind of teaming up and seeing if we can bring this event to Worcester and like pump up the volume on it? And he was so excited at the idea of maybe the event coming to Worcester. And he had told me, my mom hasn't been able to come to the event the last few years. She hasn't been able to get out here to Wakefield. If we could have this event in Worcester, it would mean so much to her. And that's all I needed to hear. I was like, done. It's coming to Worcester. Like, we'll figure it out. So we pulled together the team, and I said, look, I see the way this is kind of working. I'm sure you guys probably, being in like the corporate or whatever kind of world. So MADD Massachusetts has a goal they have to reach every year for fundraising. And if they meet it, the national office is going to raise their goal for the next year. And so I was like, I think we have to be kind of strategic about this here. Like, we've outgrown this location in Wakefield. We've got to get to a new scene. We've got to pump this up. So we're in Worcester. It's October 19th. Right now, it's scheduled to be in Elm Park, but we're actually, because we've had so much excitement and buzz around this event already, we're thinking that Elm Park might be a little bit small for the turnout that we're going to have. So we are actually trying to see if we could have it at Green Hill Park instead on the same day. And I think the woman at the Parks and Rec is on vacation this week is the only reason that I don't have like a solid, this is where it is. But it's definitely October 19th, and it'll be at either Elm Park or Green Hill Park. We're going to have the 5K walk. We're going to have a scavenger hunt built in so that it's an interactive walk, that you're looking for things while you're out there walking, and you have like tasks that you have to complete as a team to get to the end. We also are going to have a provider fair. So we are inviting community agencies to come and advertise their services. We're going to have a foster care recruitment table from the DCF foster care recruitment team there. We are going to have a ton of great stuff, and we're just really excited to get MADD's name out in the community, make some connections with other agencies that we can come back and do more services and be supportive and offer our services to the community. All you have to do is turn the news on, and you're hearing about somebody else has died because of a drunk driver. There's so many people impacted by this senseless behavior, because that's really what it is. Like, it's completely preventable.
Well, the magnitude that you have created behind this whole event, I'm sure you need help. I'm sure donations are needed. How can people reach out to you and offer their help? Because I know that I know you're going to need it.
Yep, exactly. So we are definitely looking for donations for raffles. We're looking for volunteers for the day of to come out. We're going to have a group of students from North High where I've done a presentation for them before. Last year, they had me come in and do a presentation with the senior class around drinking and driving. It was like right before prom season. So I had done a nice presentation with them. They're going to get a group of kids to come out and volunteer. Hoping that they might be able to get some kids from other schools within the city to come out as well. So if you're interested in volunteering the day of, we'd love to have you. If you want to have a table at our event, definitely, we want to have. If you want to be there, we want you to be there. Folks can. The event is on Facebook. It's Walk Like Mad, Greater Boston. If you search that, you'll be able to find it. Also on the website, it's MADD Massachusetts. And then you can go to the walk page and register to walk. You can also register to be a volunteer on that page. People can reach out to me through my social media. I don't know, maybe we can put a tag or something on there.
I'll put them all at the bottom.
Beautiful.
So if you, so that'll all be down in the description as well, right?
Yep.
And
excellent.
I'll also pin it to the first comment.
Excellent.
At the end there.
MADD Massachusetts has social media. Mary Kate DePamplis is the program director for MADD Massachusetts, and I can get people in touch with her. We're really excited about this event and the opportunities and the possibilities that it creates for the city of Worcester and the local community.
So Dennis and I are really excited about it too, and you're going to count on Apex Lifestyles being there, and our whole crew is going to be there too. So we're going to give you guys a big hand that day too.
Love it.
You want to come out and meet Bob GDMD and Dennis V? We'll be there live. So
100%. We'll be there, and we're going to hit up the local schools,
awesome.
colleges, and see what we can gather for support as well.
Yep, and I'm not outside of trading services here. If people want to come volunteer, but you want a presentation at your local high school out of it, I'll come talk to your kids. You want me to come and talk to your staff at your company. I'm happy to talk to whoever wants to listen to me talk about what happened to me and why you shouldn't drink and drive.
Yeah, you know what I would love, Dennis? I don't know if you had anything to ask, but I would love to see some of the things that you brought in.
Oh, my God.
I don't want to forget about that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask. It's almost like Christmas. I want to see what's in the box.
Yep. Here's the box. The handle is broke. It's 16 years old at this point. So it's moved with me a few times.
Gives its character.
Yeah, so the
it's
handle
beautiful.
is broke, which is why I had it in that other weird bag. But, and somebody in my family picked this out. I'm not sure who. But they thought, it's going to be a special chest, so we better make it look really special.
You can put it up on the desk.
All right.
Yeah, it's probably better that way.
Perfect. Let's see what we have here. This stuff is all stuff from... Let's just have a look. Oh, this is adorable. So one of the things I've done with MADD is Worcester has a program called the School Age Mothers Program. At least they used to. I'm not sure if they do still. But it's within the public school system, and it's a special program for school-age mothers. And the very first public school talk that I did was with that program years ago. And it was an amazing experience for me, especially as a young lady grappling with the reality that I will never give birth to a child, to be able to go talk to these young moms who, some of them were pregnant then, some of them had just given birth to their kids. This envelope is thank you cards from all these kids. So this one says, "Be safe, be smart, don't drink and drive. Dear Sarah, thank you for coming and talking to us. It has touched me seeing that you're still staying strong is inspirational. Hearing your story makes me want to inspire and tell other people."
Beautiful.
So, like, that's the whole entire envelope of cards from those kids.
And what was the age group you think of that?
Any age. Dennis, I was kind of surprised. Like, there was some 13, 14-year-old girls in there, all the way up to, like, 17, 18-year-old girls in the program.
So you're getting them in that. That's a really that's an age where peer pressure steps in.
Yep.
And you're able to make an enormous impact and get people to think about making the right decisions. That's incredible.
I won't read this whole thing, but this one says, after the initial shock of Sarah's story, I started to feel anger towards the driver who hit her. She acted irresponsibly that day and still continues to avoid any responsibility for what she did to Sarah. I drive through the same intersection on occasion. It could have easily been me that day instead of Sarah. That woman was going to mess up somebody else's life that day, one way or another. And then I started to feel disgust at myself. I too have made the decision to get behind the wheel after drinking, so it could have been me who hit Sarah. Either way, when it starts to sink in, one realizes that stories like Sarah's have less and less to do with fate and more to do with another person's bad choices.
It's powerful.
I almost just started crying reading that one.
This
is
very
dated
powerful.
2012, so it's been a while since I've read that. It is very sad and unfortunate what happened to Sarah. I myself have been in numerous car accidents, including one that almost took my life. I have also been through a world of pain that will last forever and had me in and out of hospitals my whole life. What I have dealt with seems minimal compared to what she had to go through. He is a very strong girl. My heart really goes out to her and her family. It must take a lot for her to go out and relive her horror all the time to a group of people who have also risked others' lives by drinking and driving. I know I will never drink and drive again, but hopefully for those in class that maybe think about it after their punishment is done, they will think twice after hearing her story.
Another powerful one. You're making an impact in people's lives.
Yeah, it's
For
pretty
real.
cool.
It's very cool.
Yeah, so like, you know, Dennis, when you were asking me before, like, what do I do, like, how do I get through the tough days? Like, this is how I get through the tough days. Staying connected with MADD is how I get through the tough days. And giving back and trying to make a difference in the world is how I get through the tough days.
Yeah, you're definitely making a difference for sure.
Sarah, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing when you can take something that so painful for you, and you're looking out for other people through an obstacle, a major obstacle that you went through. It's just incredible, and we're just first of all honored you came in here today.
Extremely honored. Yeah, this is great.
And looking forward to be part not only this event, but moving forward to help create the awareness and make sure nobody ever steps behind that wheel again and has a drink.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, guys. This was awesome.
Fantastic story. I mean, it's unbelievable that you went through that, but you know, every obstacle is kind of the way that we reach our apex. We're learning that more and more every time we discuss this with more and more people. And I'm so happy you came. Thank you so much for coming. And Dennis, I think let's wrap it up, man.
There's no quit in you, and I think that's a good thing. That I don't think it's in your vocabulary, but you're an amazing individual. You always have been an amazing individual, but seeing that you've taken this to grow that much more as an individual shows how special you are. Thank you for joining us. Keep doing what you're doing as you continually climb and touch that apex repeatedly. You are a role model for so many. Bob, as always,
it's go time.